Hello, my name is Jerry, and I'm Jerry Roberts, and this is my presentation on the right of self-determination theory that I've chosen, and I'm presenting it in light of the case study that I'm going to make connections with here, and then we'll follow up with the provisions or amendments to the United Nations Charter that could help aid this view or this theory. So to begin with, we have the, there we go. We have the theory that I chose, especially in light of the case study that I'm going to cover, and that's Cosmopolitan Realism. There are a lot of different points on this slide if you want to take a look at them yourself, and also a little quote at the bottom that I like. But the main takeaways here would be that justice may refuse the right to self-determination. The most just thing is the well-being of humans. And those matters are placed above institutions. So much to the point that there is essentially no right of self-determination for this theory. There's also a realist component, which kind of plays into the fact that theories are not a solve-all for serious political dilemmas or moral compromises. So that would be the realist part of this. When we take a look at this in reference to the case study that I have here, which is the Kurdish Nationalism movement. There's a lot of information also on this slide, but mostly what we want to talk about is firstly, the Kurdish group is the world's largest nation without a state. The Syrian government did not give the Kurdish people the right to use their own language or express themselves in any way. A lot of them were in hiding. In 2011, there was a major uprising of the Kurdish people as a push for their own nationalism in state and right of self-determination. From that, we sort of have two groups in play here, which is the PYD and the KNC. The Democratic Union Party was a breakoff of an earlier group, and the KNC is the Kurdish Nationalist Council. So both of those groups within the Kurdish nationalism movement, you don't just have one group of people that are pushing for the right of self-determination. There's a lot of fragments and little groups within there that also not only fight against opposition, which has been Iran, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, some of the terrorist groups such as ISIS, but they also sort of fight amongst each other. So it's really hard to get a group of people that are pushing to self-govern when essentially you don't have one unified group that represents the people. In 2013, they created an autonomous Kurdish administration, which is Rojava. And again, it's largely been the PYD that's been at the forefront. They've been able to make a lot of ground with their fight against ISIS. The United States has trained their military, the YPG, and funded them and given them weaponry for this fight. So in this way, they've been able to make a lot of ground, while the KNC says that they're not necessarily representing the interest of the entire Kurdish nationalist movement. Also, the PYD and their military group has been accused of human rights violations and involuntary recruitment. So there's not really a unified force, again, that's pushing towards this, which is what they would need essentially to go against opposition. Also, due to their history with the Syrian government, Syrian Kurds will not accept repression, discrimination, social exclusions, or anything in that form of what they've seen in the past from the Syrian government. So they're not looking to back down in any way. When we take a look at something like this in a right of self-determination, especially in view of the cosmopolitan realist theory, you have to ask yourself, when the right of self-determination has essentially caused a war among your people, is it worth it? And is it a right? Of course, that theory would say, no, it's not a right. especially when the consequences have been so detrimental to the people. We don't have much time here in this presentation, but I thought it only fair to find or to show some of the devastation and the consequences when we look at the right of self-determination and what the consequences are and are they worth it. You're looking at millions of displaced people, millions of refugees, poor people, just essentially a broken group of people as a result of the Kurdish uprising. So it's not a fact of if they have a right or if their claim is just in their right of self-determination. What this theory largely looks at is the consequences to the human rights and placing human rights and human well-being above that right of self-determination. And I think when we look at the severe consequences of this, and we ask ultimately who has paid these consequences, it's been the civilians. So the cosmopolitan realism theory would say that we would need to look at other compromises and other ways of solving this, and some very good reasoning and judgment in saying that, hey, this really isn't worth it, basically. So when we look at the United Nations charter and the ways that we could possibly amend it or make provisions to it so that that theory is able to be put into practice, the United Nations has been both a help and a hindrance to the Syrian civil war. Most recently, if you follow this, in July, the United Nations got an approved vote to continue to flow aid into Syria through one crossing. That's been hard to get. Some people have said that it's been a cruel thing that Russia has used their veto power to stop aid going into Syria. But again, when we look at Chapter 5 here of the United Nations Charter and the Security Council, you have the P5, which are China, Great Britain, France, Russia, and the United States. They are essentially the most powerful nations in the world. And if you looked over the charter, you saw the Security Council show up again and again and again. They are the most powerful part of the United Nations. Essentially, nothing happens without their approval. And the P5 are the permanent members of the Security Council, and they also have the power to veto any votes that go through that they don't want. They will often veto votes for their own interest and also for the interest of their allies. So I would begin there and just restructure the Security Council. Largely what we have here is some of the biggest decisions in the world being made by the most powerful in the world. So it's really politicized the United Nations, and it's been hard to seek that mission of placing human rights above institutions, which is what the cosmopolitan realist theory is all about. Again, largely the Security Council and the way that it's structured makes that almost impossible. A second portion here that we would look at is Chapter 1, the purposes and principles, and the article that directly deals with the right of self-determination. I would just add a provision here. It's not that I don't think it's wrong to respect the principle, certainly of equal rights, but also that of self-determination. I would just add the provision here, and that is so long as it does not impede on another's right to live peaceably and without harm. If self-determination would prove to be detrimental to the people and to the well-being of the people, then it's not a right that should be acknowledged, even if it is a just claim. And I do think that we do see that the Kurdish nationalism movement, it is warranted. The consequences and the detriment that it's brought in seeking it has just been too high as far as peace and war and the well-being of the human beings in large over institutions. So again, thank you very much for watching. This last page here is just my works cited page. If you want to take a look at some of the pictures and the information and facts that I got on the Syrian war and the crises that we're seeing over there, you'll find that here. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to seeing yours. Thank you.